Welcome to this episode of the Cold Start Corner. I'm Eric Matei, joined by a very special guest in Steve Alexander. Steve, hello. Welcome to the Cold Start Corner.
Thanks for having me, Eric. Pleasure.
So thanks so much for being here. So for those viewers that are yet to meet Steve, Steve Alexander, 20 plus years experience in the industry. He holds this role of head of marketing and partnerships over at Anagram. And Steve has very much developed a vast expertise in the world of vision plans. So today on the Cold Start Corner, we're going to be talking about navigating the world of vision plans and direct pay from a cold start perspective. So Steve, thank you again for joining us. I know we've got a ton to get into. So what do you say we just jump in and take to it? So I know, what's the first topic we want to touch on here?
Well, if we're going to talk about how cold start practice ought to evaluate vision plans, I think it should start with what evaluation actually means. And I know that's part of the Akrinos strategy in general, analyze, right? That's the first step of how you guys do stuff. So how do you make an appropriate determination about vision plans as a cold start practice? And I think we have a tendency as people to look for as simple a solution as we can. And many people are all or nothing folks. And the truth is, this is a very context specific conversation, and it has to be that way, which unfortunately means to make the right decision for you, you have to do a fair amount of research or analysis. So what are the kinds of things that you want to analyze when we're talking about vision plans as a cold start practice? The primary concern for practices, and Eric, please chime in, is how am I going to get people through the door, right? I'm going to open this practice. I've got all these great ideas and I can't wait to help my patients, but how do I find those patients? And vision plans, for all their faults, they do to some degree drive patients through your door because patients through their employers have these benefits and they want to use them, and a lot of them want to shop locally with them. So you get that opportunity to see those patients. So the question then becomes, okay, if they're going to drive patients to me, what does that cost? And that's where the confusion can kind of set in, is vision plan constructs, both from the patient perspective and the practice perspective, are opaque. It's very difficult as a patient to know what my benefits actually mean, and it's equally difficult as a practice to know what those patient benefits actually mean for the top and bottom line of the practice. So if I were opening cold, I would start looking into vision plans based on potential patient volume, as that's my primary concern. So industry-wide, VSP is probably the most prevalent vision plan in terms of covered patient lives, followed by IMED. If your neck of the woods has a bunch of employers that have VSP and a bunch of employers that have IMED, then the opportunity for vision plans is primarily around those two plans. The other ones, Davis, Superior, Spectera, et cetera, they can be a little bit more regional or a little bit more densely populated based on the contracts they're able to negotiate. And generally speaking, the Davis, Superior, Specteras are lower in terms of reimbursement and a little bit more onerous in terms of the limitations they put on your practice or the restrictions that they put on your practice to participate in those plans. So I know I've been talking for a little bit and a lot of detail.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, you bring up a couple really good points that I wanted to call time out on. First and foremost, we're talking about leveraging the vision plan to drive patients into the cold start practice, but there is a cost associated with that. So let's talk a little bit about this, right? I think it's safe to say if there were a way that we could present a full schedule of direct pay patients, most modern optometrists would probably take that. But help us understand exactly what these costs are associated with a vision plan for a cold start.
Absolutely. So when you sign up for any vision plan, part of what you agree to is your reimbursement structure from that vision plan. And with most of what we're talking about, it includes services side as well as on the materials side. With IMED and VSP, you're going to be allowed a certain reimbursement for each exam and certain limited reimbursement on other additional services, but focus on what the reimbursement is for the exam. Now, it's going to vary state to state, city to city, practice to practice, depending on the position of the vision plan in your neck of the woods. So if you're looking to get credentialed with, let's say, IMED, and IMED has a ton of practices available in your same zip code, they are going to be less inclined to give you a strong reimbursement or a strong exam reimbursement because they don't have to. They're able to cover their patient lives without your practice. So they are then negotiating from a position of power. And then you're subject to a take it or leave it sort of situation. So the cost of accepting that plan is the difference between what you would charge a private pay patient and the services you would offer to the private pay patient, and the cost and the reimbursement that you're going to get from being in network and the services that you are no longer offering to that patient. Because something that is kind of unseen here is a vision plan eye exam is usually quite different than a private pay eye exam.
Well, let's talk about that, right? This whole what's no longer being covered. Elaborate on that a bit for us, Steve.
When I speak with ODs, especially cold start practices, they have a lot of great ideas of what they think an eye exam should consist of. And it's usually, as a baseline, they have the same kind of stuff: color testing, depth perception, visual acuity, systemic checks, pressure, and so forth. But many practices also want to do retinal images or visual fields or eye wellness, as the case might be, or Optomaps. I mean, there's a ton of really great technology that offer both diagnostic benefit to the practice and kind of a wow factor to your patients, which then engenders loyalty. None of those tests are covered as part of the general vision plan eye exam. So anytime a patient comes in there, in order to continue with a practice's desired standard of care, it necessitates an upcharge. And that upcharge can feel like a barrier to the patient who's expecting a covered eye exam. And that creates kind of friction. So what a lot of practices end up doing is, for their vision plan patients, they sort of push their desired quality of care to the side and just do what the vision plan says. So there's a financial loss associated with that, and the opportunity to build loyalty that is also lost in association with that.
Wow. So if we think even just right now, based on what we've discussed thus far, looking at growing the practice primarily through vision plans. And by the way, Steve, I really like how you frame this up, that it's very important for all of our viewers to realize that you really want to approach this very objectively, right? Evaluate each plan based on the need in your community and based on the scope of care that you want to deliver. And if you feel that you can deliver it through that plan. But getting back to it, right? Let's then compare vision plan and some of these costs you say are associated with the vision plan, and also some of this almost at times forcing the doctor's hand on how to practice, how to deliver care. And let's now compare that to the direct pay patient that comes in.
Yeah, absolutely. So up to this point, we've been talking about the services side of things and the limits that are put on there. If we hop over to the materials side of things for a second, VSP has a pretty well-defined schedule of pricing and upcharges for the materials of eyewear. But what it always necessitates is, in order to be profitable with a vision plan, the practice has to give those patients the most expensive products available. Not because they're the best, not because they're always right for the patient, but because those are the ones that are going to make the practice profitable. And to be clear, it is the right business move, but the incentives for the practice to do that aren't necessarily right for the patient or for the long-term health of the practice. So let's take any top tier progressive that you might have in mind. Is a very expensive lens, and it offers good quality vision for the patient. But there's also private label lenses that have the same kind of technology, equivalent technology, that if we're talking about on a private pay basis, this lens can cost the patient $350 all said and done, and this lens can cost the patient $800 all said and done. When you're doing this on a private pay basis, your capture rate will be higher, so you're going to be able to sell this more frequently than this one. And this one might scare some patients away and you may never see them again. But this is also the one that you have to sell to a vision plan patient in order to be profitable. And if that sounds convoluted, if that sounds difficult to grasp, guess what? It is convoluted and it is difficult to grasp. And it is hard to balance as a practice. What do you offer to which patient and when? And from a profitability standpoint, if you're only selling the top tier products and that's what you get accustomed to and that's what your patients get accustomed to, the opportunity to sell multiple pairs goes away because a patient spending $800 on one pair of glasses is done for the most part. We have to keep in mind the economic climate in which we're working. Also, most Americans cannot afford a $500 emergency, let alone an $800 elective purchase.
Sure. It's fascinating. So I mean, what I'm hearing here is, and we're seeing this as we're seeing more and more consolidation across healthcare. We are seeing healthcare costs are going up, and if we look at it through this lens, no pun intended, but through the lens of vision plans in vision care, then it is kind of all of these perhaps a lot of hands in the pie, if you will, a lot of hands in the bucket, whereas a remarkable, high performance, innovative, tech forward private label may provide just that same level of performance, but at a fraction of the price because you don't have all of these corporate interests involved, I suppose.
That's absolutely right. I know your audience might not want to get into the nitty gritty of how labs work and how pricing works, but something that people ought to know about is the licensing fee associated with all of these branded progressives. Labs will sometimes call it a click fee. What that means is when the lab processes a branded progressive, they're charged between $40 and $70 just to make that brand, not including labor, not including materials, not including quality, not including shipping, certainly, just to call it a Verilux lens or a Premier lens or what have you. And if you can eliminate that cost alone, your cost of doing business goes down by 20%. Now, obviously, that is situational as well, but something to be aware of is those brands are great. I want to be really clear too, right? Verilux makes a good lens, Premier makes a good lens, Zeiss, Hoya,
Absolutely.
Nikon, they all make really great products, but they also make expensive products, and not every patient wants to pay that. The other thing to think about as a cold start practice is that many patients come in thinking that private practice eye care is more expensive than other brick and mortar eye care or online eye care. And if we can dispel that myth, because it is a myth, then we are stronger in our community. If you can be the cold start private practice that is affordable and friendly and different, then you will carve out your own audience.
Fantastic. I love hearing you say that because, a big thing that we're a part of is the vision, right? For doctors to own their vision of what they want. And now, there's a lot of work that goes into it, but start with that vision. Start with that core vision, that scope of care that you, the viewer, want to provide in your community, and that culture you'd like to grow around your practice. So, okay, so now let's to get back into things here. We're talking about vision plans, right? We're talking about, and Steve said it, kind of kicked off the conversation with it, to be very objective with how we're making these selections, which is truly going to be in the best interest of your practice and your community, right? So now, though, if we realize we do have some processes to go about analyzing exactly which plans we should take, right? For instance, which ones are most common in your area, which ones perhaps best align with the scope of care that you would like to be providing your patients, as well as getting into something else you mentioned regarding understanding some of the other costs and material side where, yes, there are going to be rules that you will have to play by, right? So now let's look at this through the cold start lens of direct pay. So now let's consider, for those viewers out there who are planning their cold start and really want to have a strong direct pay presence, they don't want to be so reliant on the vision plans. What are some of the keys to success for launching a successful cold start without relying on vision plans?
I think you nailed it, actually. It is in understanding who and what you are as a practice. If you want to be just like a lens crafters, you're going to have a really hard time carving out a niche. If you want to replicate a successful store that already exists and already has an audience, it's really difficult to convince people to see your version of something they can already get. If instead you're coming out of school, or you're coming out of you're starting a new practice after having some experience, and you know that you want to carve out a sports vision practice, then you think about your approach to the community through that as your primary focus. If you, which means, you're talking about sports vision, maybe instead of taking that, those 6 vision plans, I'm going to spend those funds on sponsoring a little league team, and I'm going to be out in the community with these sports teams so that the kids in the community have my practice's name on their back, and then I can go talk to their parents and tell them what sports vision is. Because for as much as we understand that sports vision is a big opportunity and can benefit kids and can benefit them, outside of sports too, it helps them in school, and it helps. And also, once you get kids into your practice, you're going to get their parents, because they're going to like that you're helping their kids. It is a significant community building opportunity. And that's just one example of how you would do it. But figure out what it is you want to do, and figure out where's the likeliest place to find those patients, and be there, whether it is digitally or physically, be there.
Yeah, you bring up such an important point, Steve, and that is really own your vision and market your practice around that vision to that target segment, whatever it may be. And I love the sports vision. That's a growing specialty. Dry eye, myopia management, aesthetics. I mean, the list goes on. Medical, the list goes on. A lot of fascinating ways that doctors can really grow practices in the modern eye care environment. So, okay, so now to kind of pull everything together, and let's talk about having that practice that you're going to stay out of network, but there are things that you can do to be an out of network provider and do remarkable things. So share with us a little bit about what that looks like from the cold start perspective. Again, I don't want to be in network with these plans, but I do want to be sure that when those patients come in, we can take care of them and get compensated.
So once you're getting patients through your door, even if you're out of network with every vision plan, you've not credentialed with any vision plans, you are very likely going to receive phone calls that say something like, hey, I have a vision plan, can I come to your office? One thing that as a cold start you want to nip in the bud before it happens is that question, hey, I want to come to your practice, can I use my benefits? You want to answer that question with yes. The vast majority of patients who have a vision plan have some element of out-of-network benefit. Now, with certain tools that you can put at your disposal, like Anagram Access, you can pull the eligibility and benefits for those patients, even if you're not credentialed with the plan. So if a patient with VSP calls your practice, you can let them know you're going to get a reimbursement of $50 on your eye exam and up to $130 on your eyewear, and we'll be able to give you a discount when you're in to entice the patient to come through the door. But even so, yeah, obviously a little biased here. I think Anagram Access helps a practice make this easier. It is much easier to get an out-of-network patient to become a patient of yours when you can identify their benefits and file a claim on the patient's behalf. You take all of the work away from the patient, you make it seamless, or as seamless as possible. And sure. That is an element that I think you talk about a ton, is your patients, your customers are looking for convenience, right? That is one of the primary reasons that patients shop online, is because it's convenient. Not even that it's less expensive, because in most cases it isn't. But it is convenient to pull out my phone. It is convenient to pull up a tab on my browser and order something. So if you can make using your out-of-network benefits convenient, you're much, much more likely to win that patient. But if you have a strong reputation, if you have a strong specialty, patients will want to come see you anyway. And what's kind of vital to capturing those is making the patient aware that you are going to help them use their benefits, whether that's using Anagram Access to make it seamless or providing an itemized receipt, giving them the address where they can send their form, whatever it is, but make sure that you make it clear to your patients that you are there in service of them. That is how you win patient loyalty in every circumstance.
Absolutely. Love it. Love it. Great insights there, particularly with the convenience piece. You know, Steve, we work closely with cold starts. We also work closely with practices that are undergoing some transformations, right? And the degree to which convenience for the patient can be huge to the effectiveness, to the ability to deliver care, success in the optical and retail, you name it. Convenience plays such a big role. So well, Steve, I tell you, man, I don't know about you. I feel like we could probably continue this conversation. But our goal here at Cold Start Corner is to have some really great content. Thank you so much for joining us. For those viewers that want to learn more, how can they connect with you and continue this dialogue? How can they learn more about Anagram?
Feel free to reach out to me directly at steve@anagram.care. So anagram.care. Visit our website, anagram.care. Feel free to call my office, actually. It's 224-296-1963. Feel free to call that line, text that line. Hopefully you can tell I'm passionate about this. I've been doing this for a long time, and I love having this conversation. I love helping practices and practitioners do right by their patients and help get vision plans out of their way.
Love it. Love it. Steve Alexander, thank you so much for joining us here on this episode of the Cold Start Corner. To all of our viewers out there, thank you for tuning in. We hope you found this valuable. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on the socials. Check out the Cold Start Corner at Akrinos.com regularly because we're constantly dropping new content. Steve Alexander, Anagram, thank you again so much for joining us, and we'll see you very soon at Vision Expo.
My pleasure. Thanks so much, Eric.
All right, Steve.